Welcome to Modern Anarchy, the podcast featuring real conversations with conscious objectors to the status quo. I'm your host, Nicole.
I tried to keep her quiet, but she's screaming inside of me. I tried to keep her hiding, oh, shut up. I tried to keep her quiet, but she's a wild, wild woman.
On today's episode, sex and intimacy coach Carlene joins us for a conversation all about unlocking your erotic creativity. Together, we talk about the birthright to sexual expression, going from zero to penetration, and rethinking intimacy in our relationships. Y'all, these are just like prime topics for my areas of interest. So this was such a fun conversation with Carlene where we talk about, how to have better sex, how to be more connected in sex, and how can we have more intimacy in our relationships with platonic and romantic partners. I mean, these are the conversations that will hopefully bring us to more connection and more pleasure in our lives. So I hope y'all really enjoy today's episode and come away with a couple of nuggets to be thinking about how you want to show up in your relationships and with your sex life. Y'all, tune in.
I recently saw a quote that I think is like kind of sticking with me as far as the work that I do, which is, and it was one of the Bettys.
Betty Dodson, Betty Martin.
Anyway,
you know which
I
one.
can't remember. I think it might have been Betty Martin.
Okay.
Now that I think about it, but I could also be wrong. But the quote was about, I can't remember what specifically it was in reference to, but it was about like the right to sexual expression as opposed to just like sexuality.
Ooh.
And I've been really thinking about that. Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot, and just that concept.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I really try and dig into and emphasize in the work that I do is teaching people that, you know, digging into sexuality is an opportunity, and eroticism is an opportunity to, it's not a script, and it changes every time. And while that can feel really scary, it's an opportunity for creativity, and that like our erotic experiences are, it's just a creative expression.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And so seeing that quote, I was like, oh, okay. Like the idea of sexual expression being a right that we have, and that more room needs to be made for that. Then, so other work that I do, which is unpaid work, is that I do work with Cascades Abortion Support Collective. I'm a collective member. Obviously, things have changed for us, but thinking about the right to abortion and birth control also being a way to express ourselves without pretty profound consequences if we don't want to have those consequences.
Absolutely.
So anyway, those things have all been kind of wrapping up for me.
Sure. And I mean, it's totally connected, right? I mean, I've definitely thought about this and haven't been able to even talk about on the podcast about the stressors that is this new dynamic for tons of people, right? I mean, having sex now becomes an increased stressor of what happens if I get pregnant. I mean, it's changing the whole dynamic too of like the mental experience as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
So anyway.
I know. It's like, do we even want to go down that path? That path is dark and sad. You know what I mean? The politics. But I think, how did you get into this work? What really propelled you to start doing this sort of advocacy? And is coaching, is that the word that you might use for your work?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I have long wanted to be a sex worker. And I have a long-term nesting partner, and he and I spoke with each other, or I spoke to him and was like, this is something that I wanted to do, but it was after FOSTA SESTA. And he said, it's too bad we can't find a safe way to do that. Turns out I ended up going into sex work anyway later on. So I do both, but
Yeah.
But at the time, you know, we were trying to navigate that, and he was trying to assist me in navigating that, I should say. obviously it was my journey to navigate, and he was just like there to support me.
Oh, great.
But he said that, and it kind of sent the wheels turning. And I had seen, so I'm trained as a surrogate partner, and that's the framework from which, so I don't necessarily do strictly surrogate partner work, because that works with a client and a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't necessarily work with therapists. I'm open to it. I have that training, but a lot of times it's just me and the client. Mm-hmm. But I use the framework because I really truly believe in the framework. But I had learned about it from a TLC show. I want to say it was called Weird Sex, but I think that's wrong because I don't think it would use the word weird. But anyway, I had seen it 3 years before, and I was like, okay, let's look into it. So I used the Google machine and found my way to a training outside of Los Angeles. And so that's how I got started.
And then the rest is history, right?
Yeah.
I'm thinking, for the listener who's never heard this term, could you explain a little bit what a surrogate partner is?
Yeah. So a lot of folks will potentially have heard the word or the phrase sex surrogate. And I'll explain why that has changed in a minute. But they're the same thing. It's the same kind of work. Mm-hmm. And what a surrogate partner does is that we work collaboratively with a client and a therapist. And we're working to achieve some kind of erotic or sexual goal. And it is the reason that it is called a surrogate partner now, as opposed to a sex surrogate, is that the work has come to encompass so much more than just sexuality. We're in a relationship with our clients, one that very much, it is it's a therapeutic relationship. Mm-hmm. It's a relationship of affection and sometimes love. And there is, of course, a slight, I don't want to use the word power dynamic, but maybe knowledge differential.
Sure, absolutely.
So it doesn't look completely like, a traditional romantic relationship, but it is in a lot of ways. And all of that intimacy and trust is the foundation upon which the therapy and the work actually happens. The three kind of principles of surrogate partner therapy are relaxation, communication, and sensate focus. And we take folks through a series of exercises. The framework is always about systematic desensitization. So we start with things that feel much more safe. And then eventually we're kind of slowly stretching people, right, into, more sophisticated conversations, right, around. So teaching them more sophisticated ways of communicating. That includes, more sophisticated ways of exploring our bodies, right, and enjoying and sinking into that sensate focus. Yeah. So that's a bit of what we do.
Yeah, definitely. So these are, to clarify, these are people that you're paired with?
Yeah, well, they usually reach out to me, or they will speak to their therapist. It really depends. I've had referrals from therapists, doctors. That's increasingly becoming a place where folks are reaching out to us.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
And then also folks just find us. They scour the internet for us.
Sure, absolutely. And so then, could you tell me more about the role that you play within that relationship for the client?
Yeah, it's complex because it's unlike any relationship I think anybody else. It exists in an interesting space in that I am both their guide, but we are partnered, right? In a way. And everything is collaborative. So while I make the suggestions, I think this is what might be the next best thing. These are the couple of exercises I think will suit, your growth during this work. They also get to. I always run it by them a couple of times. Actually, usually at the end of the previous session, and then talk to them, check in, and the beginning of the next session. And they get to, I mean, also that's a practice in like consent, right? And informed consent, but
absolutely.
they always get to be an active participant in like, this feels good, or like, I would like this, and we can negotiate that.
Mm-hmm.
So it models the way that like an aspirational relationship, right, should look like, where
Mm-hmm.
there's checking in, good communication, talking with each other when we hit like pain points or shame. And ultimately, like, the relationship has to end, and being able to make sure that we can end it in a way that is loving and caring is something that largely falls on the surrogate partner to make sure to like be responsible for.
Absolutely. I mean, this sounds like an incredibly healing process for the people that connect with you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And there's usually crying
Mm.
throughout.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, this is incredibly beautiful. As you're saying this, you would consider this sex work?
No, so I actually do
Okay.
sex work separate from that.
Yeah. Okay.
I wouldn't consider it sex work. I think
Yeah.
that sex is present, and
Mm-hmm.
sex is available at a certain point in the progression, right?
Sure.
And that can take a while. It's certainly not an offering in the beginning, because there are foundational skills that we are trying to teach.
Sure.
But a colleague of mine, she once said, sex is an option, but it's not the focus.
Mm-hmm.
And so, intercourse is something that can happen at the end, and other types of sex for sure.
Sure. Yeah.
And that is something that kind of is distinguishing. It's a
Mm-hmm.
distinguishing quality. That's what I'm trying to say.
Sure. Sure.
From other modalities, is that we can actually, there is not just permission granted, but a lot of times folks are looking to explore their sexuality together in a broader container. Maybe that's what I'm looking for.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think this is great. I mean, yeah, within the therapy container, it can be a much smaller container with boundaries there. So I think it's great that we have, other people in this role to facilitate, this healing, this connection, because all of our healing and connection happens in relationship with people, whether that's a therapist, whether that's, a loved person in your life, a surrogate partner. Like, these are the things that heal us, relationships.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think it's great. I mean, my initial thought is that the legality piece of that, and with doctors referring to you, how has that gone? I can imagine that that's pretty complicated.
It is and it isn't.
Okay,
It's
yeah.
really interesting. I think one of the things that folks get most hung up on,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of that is a broader concern that has happened in the last 20 to 30 years, actually probably a little longer than that. But, this concern about liability, medical malpractice, things like that.
Yeah.
And that's really been drilled in by education institutions. So people are very afraid. And I understand that impulse. One, there are just ways around it. I've had therapists say, like, hey, it might be worth you looking into surrogate partner therapy, and just leaving it at that. And that's like them protecting themselves.
Yep.
However, it's not necessary to even do that, because there is no explicit law in any state. A lot of people get a little bit confused about California, because when Kamala Harris was the state district attorney, I believe is what her position was, she basically said, I have no concern for prosecuting this, because, it's between two consenting adults, it's for a therapeutic purpose. No. And people will take it. A lot of people have come to me and said, well, that means it's legal in California. That's technically not true. However, it's not illegal.
Sure.
In any of the states.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for that is that there is not a quid pro quo. The work that we're being paid for is to guide people through their eroticism, and it's not explicitly, you're going to pay me and we're going to do this.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
people will say it's a legal gray area, but really, I mean, the best way to say it is like it's not legal, but it's not illegal.
Absolutely.
It's
Yeah.
very confusing.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, which makes it tricky. And this is probably why it's not, maybe as well known. At least for me, this is the first time that I am hearing of it, right? And so I think this is part of why, things get suppressed like that. And I think it should be legal that we're able to engage in consensual sex that is paid for. I think that is healing. I think all that stuff should be legal when it's through two consenting adults. So I'm happy at least there is this little gray area where we can do the healing work that is needed.
Yeah, absolutely.
So take me then through your average client, maybe. Like, what is the typical concern you see when they come in through the door? Walk me through that experience.
So historically, I would say, and there's much to talk about this and why this is the case, but I would say that predominantly we have in the past seen clients that are cis men who are either struggling with early ejaculation or, difficulty with maintaining an erection. That's the kind of standard fare. That's what people are used to, used to hearing about. And a lot of that is and we have discussions about this because there are male surrogate partners as well who both work with either, gay male partners or work with, straight female partners. And increasingly it's changing, but when I first entered around 2016, it was still kind of a place, we were having discussions around people who are not cis men not realizing that sexuality is their birthright too. And so predominantly it's been straight cis men, again, having difficulty with ejaculation, having difficulty with maintaining an erection. But it's changed so much now. We have clients who are gender fluid, who are transitioning. I'm increasingly seeing people with religious trauma. I'm also seeing clients. Yeah.
I'm here for that conversation.
Yeah, it's and actually there's somebody who a lot of times, depending on what their goal is, there is somebody here in Portland that I do refer to because her specialty is religious trauma, and she's not a surrogate partner. She is a somatic sex educator, but I'll be the first to say that I am not the most equipped with that. I did not grow up deeply religious. Now, depending on what their goals are and what they need, sometimes it does make sense to see me. But yeah, religious trauma is a big one anymore. And a lot of increasingly, and this could be because I am a fat sex coach. And I think sometimes people feel really comforted by that. But a lot of body stuff, body dysmorphia, feeling a lot of medical trauma from, past experiences and and not feeling connected to their bodies in an erotic way. Anymore, there's not as much of a typical client.
I love that. Right? No, that's great. I mean, who would want to have the same client over and over again? Like, it's kind of boring in and of itself. So I'm glad you have that diversity, and also that it seems to be, I think part of me wonders, given the social conditioning to anyone that's not a cis heterosexual male, there's a lot of pressure there to not explore your sexuality, a lot of shame and conditioning. So it's exciting to hear that other people are coming out to get help, to get these services. I think that's a sign that our society is moving towards a little bit more space for all the other people that have existed forever, right?
Absolutely.
So then your eroticism, how do you help people figure out what that is? Where do we take them? What do you do? Because that's such a big question. So much creativity, so much individualistic nature in that. Where do you even start when you're confronted with these challenges?
Honestly, we use the sensate focus exercises as a good foundation because what it does is it kind of destigmatizes just touch for your own pleasure. With that as the principal foundation of just erotic exploration, we then invite people. So I'll give you a couple examples of some sensate focus exercises. So in the beginning, we start with like touching objects, right? So not even touching a body. And then we move to hands and face, which tends to be very comforting. Although I get a lot of feedback that people find the face caress incredibly erotic, which is very interesting, or at least sensual. I think it's like really deeply connective. And almost every client that I've spoken to is like, I know I'm not supposed to feel this. And of course, then there's the conversation around, that is okay. That is okay that it feels arousing. That's probably very exciting for you. And I invite that and welcome that. And then we increasingly move to, disrobing, doing a back caress, front caresses. And then the place where we shift things is when we do the erotic body mapping. And that's that place to kind of explore our eroticism, because we're just using like our hands, once we get to like the face caress, the back caress and the front caresses, I use my face to touch them, but we're still not doing any kind of like lip contact, no tongues, nothing like that.
Sure.
It's just, we're keeping it simple so that folks can we're retraining the brain instead of to be thinking about everything else that we could be thinking about and worrying about satisfying the partner. We're retraining the brain to like reconnect with our nerve endings and just feel into our body. So once we've kind of got that base down, then we do the erotic body mapping. And that's the place where you can play with tongues, teeth, and touch different body parts. And then that's kind of where the discovery happens, and people find, funny little spots that are very thrilling to be touched or to licked or things like that. And that's kind of the first introduction into that like erotic creativity.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm thinking about that client that you mentioned who, with the face caressing, felt that sexual, whatever sort of word we're going to use to describe that energy. But because of social conditioning that might have said that's not where you feel an erotic zone, I think this is part of the problem, right? Like there is more than the genitals that are erotic, and can bring arousal. And we need to spend time exploring that for each person, kind of exactly what you're talking about here, of slowing down to have curiosity and explore the body.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's funny you say the sensate focus too, because I looked back because I have the book like right there, and I have not actually flipped through it yet. Like the first couple pages, then it's kind of like sat there. So this is my sign from the universe that I need to open the book and look at it. But I think it's definitely something that at least I can relate to as a sexual assault survivor, right? Like this letting go or learning to reprogram your nervous system after having a traumatic experience with touch, right? So once you have that same sort of experience, your body's trying to protect you, and it can flood that same thoughts, emotions, tensing up in the body and all that sort of stuff. So it takes time to help your nervous system relax back down so that you can feel.
Yeah, and that's something that's actually one of the things that I forgot to talk about was like a lot of the folks that we see do have sexual trauma. And what's great about this work, I had a client who we took a really long time to get to any kind of touching. And then we did the hand caress, and they would hover there. They seemed to be okay when I was touching them. They were nervous. I could definitely feel it. But so basically we take turns, right? So like I will be the active participant. I will touch their hand, and then we'll switch. And when it was their time to be the active participant, they would get their hand like this far away, like an inch away, and then they would pull back. And it took probably 6 times of doing that. Like get close and hover, pull back, get close and hover, pull back. And then finally they were like, okay. And then they could lay their hand. And even then they could only tolerate usually the exercise is about 15 minutes each. And I think they tolerated about 5 minutes. And then it was like, okay, that's all I can do right now. And that's okay. There's a ton of permission to take as long as is necessary. And it's what makes this therapy really, really incredibly effective.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they've done a few, they're kind of old, but there have been some studies that have been done, and the efficacy of this work is like 98.7%
Mm-hmm.
effective.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it's just going as slow as is necessary.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I feel like sometimes there's just not, or maybe just in general, there is not that container space to do this sort of work within our society. Where do you go to have this sort of help that we need after a difficult experience or trauma or any of the things that you mentioned?
Yeah. And it can be really difficult to do with a partner.
Exactly.
I think there's so many expectations set. And also, that I'm maybe like giving a hard time to partners, but on the other hand, if you're not equipped for that, that could be a lot to take on as a partner of somebody, who's dealing with these struggles. So
Yeah.
to their credit, it could be
Mm-hmm.
very, if you don't have the skill set to do that,
Yes.
how are you going to do it well and not like re-traumatize that person, you know?
Exactly. Exactly. There's a point where we know if we don't have the skill set, we might be causing more harm, right? So yeah, if your partner needs, professional help in this, that is definitely somewhere to go. I'm thinking, for the people that maybe might not need professional help, maybe a little bit like further back that need just general exploring of their eroticism. I'm thinking about the partner dynamics with that, or multiple partners, right? Sometimes I feel like this thought that taking the time to slow down and do something like this to rework with your nervous system, feel things, it's almost not the sex that you imagine. It's not the sexy, oh my gosh, we're just in this throw of all of it and it just rolls. Like, no, it takes this like slowing down to say, hey, I want to explore something. A lot of communication. I mean, this is challenging all senses of what we consider sex to be.
Yeah, very much so. And that can feel very unsexy. I mean, we're really like hemmed in by these rules that we see that like sex in order to be good is this like throw them down on the ground. That's one of the things that drives me nuts when I
Yeah.
watch like TV programs and movies. Is I'm just like, and you know what? Hey, sure, sometimes it is that, and
Yeah.
that's fun too.
Mm-hmm.
But like, there's a lot of fun in like in the suspense, right? And the anticipation in moving really slow and like, what's gonna happen next. Not, and by next it could be today or it could be in a week, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
and that building that anticipation. Also, the longer you go in like an activity, the
Mhm.
more buildup happens. And I think people
Mm,
forget that. Like, it's like, what's the fun in like a throwdown 10-minute thing? Sometimes that can be a really good time.
yeah.
But there's something to be said for an hour or a day devoted to that,
Mhm.
like,
Absolutely.
so teaching that, like, I think we tend to believe that like more is more, faster is better, etc. And understanding that like that's not necessarily the case, and especially with our
Mhm.
bodies and the way we feel, we've programmed ourselves so much to ignore so much of the sensation that we experience. And that's not a bad thing all the time. There is a level of protection that I think is necessary to move through this world as it is now, especially. But staying in that space of protection all the time cuts you off from a lot of like lovely sensations. And so you're missing out on like lighter touch,
Oh, yeah.
or low touch, things like that.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, sometimes when you come in really hard, you can't, it's hard. What's a good metaphor for this? I'm trying to think of something. The parallels to food are always very similar to me, at least I think in terms of pleasure. Like when you slow down to slowly eat that bite of chocolate and feel it melt on your mouth, it tastes different than when you swallow it down. Not saying one is better than the other, right? Like they're great. Sometimes you want to pop that M&M in your mouth and just keep going on with your day. But like there is a beauty to slowing down and letting it just like melt on your tongue.
Absolutely. We actually have a food sharing exercise towards the end. It's kind of usually after like intercourse or something has happened. And that's something that we
Mhm.
do is we feed each other, but we also take the time. to savor the food.
Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned that.
Well, I think it's all related to mindfulness, right? Like when you and this is like on multiple levels too, of like even the practice of gratitude, right? Slowing down to acknowledge the things that you're grateful for and feeling that overwhelming sense of pleasure just from doing that practice. Slowing down to be with your food instead of texting so that you can actually taste it. And I think some of what happens with trauma, whether that be physically, emotionally, socially, all the stuff that we have to deal with. I mean, you can be in a sexual dynamic and not be present with the sensation, right? Because it might be too overwhelming, or maybe your head is somewhere else. So like, I think a lot of this also, at least from my understanding, comes back to this practice of mindfulness, of slowing our thoughts down to be able to direct our focus to our body.
Absolutely. And so much of, I think, the world demands us to just carry on and continue and multitask. And it is an act of rebellion to just not do that, to refuse.
Yes. Relaxation, slowing down is an act of rebellion in a capitalistic society that is trying to overstimulate you with just your phone alone. Talk about notifications, like bing, 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 you know what I mean? Like, our society is constantly trying to push us in that way. So yeah, to slow down, it's a privilege and an act of rebellion, you know, to be able to have that time. And I don't know, it's something I'm continually trying to practice, because I feel like before you notice you've had your coffee, you're on to the next thing, you're just like, your nervous system's so high up that it takes time to like slow back down.
It's celebrated too. So it's really hard to be, you know, slowing down is laziness, slowing down is decadent, right? Well, what's wrong with decadence? What is wrong with decadence? You know, who decided that that wasn't something that we all deserve so much more of than we get?
Absolutely.
You know? And I know it was not one person, but
right. Absolutely. No, I'm totally with you. I think that if, you know, my one goal in my life is to slow down enough that I enjoy it. Do you know what I mean? Like, just slow the hell down.
Yeah.
And especially with sex, I mean, that's definitely one of the bigger things that I think when we were talking earlier about the dynamics with your partner, slowing down. I mean, teasing, edging, getting close, pausing. I mean, these build up some wild experiences in the body that are so pleasurable. And I think it's great to take that space. I mean, distance makes the heart grow fonder, right? All these sort of pieces where like, it's nice to be there, but it's also nice to take that time, build, let it stretch out. And another thing I was thinking about was communication. A lot of those scenes you see in movies with these hot, steamy scenes where people just come at each other and there's no discussion of, you know, safe words, no discussion of what touch feels okay, and it just like happens magically. All right, that might happen in some situations and be great, but there is something so incredibly sexy about taking the time to slow down and communicate so you can feel safe in your body with the other person and like feel that full level of arousal that is possible with safety.
Absolutely. And furthermore, if you're going at, I mean, some of these like things that you witness are pretty aggressive, and aggression in sex is okay. However, if you're having aggression in sex and you aren't communicating either beforehand or, well, I mean, really, ideally, you should be communicating beforehand and in the middle and after. This can lead to physical injury, and it can be incredibly traumatic just because of the like pure logistics of like hurting somebody, you know? The average length of a vagina is 3 inches long. That's not very long. You just can't, we shouldn't probably just be beating the hell out of it unless we're okay that you know, we're sure that that's something that that person wants. And so that it kind of concerns me when I see that this is kind of what's being taught. And it's all predicated on this idea that there is a formula to sex. And so, of course, I can't hurt them, even though I'm like throwing them up against the wall and like inserting myself into them without any kind of like anything beforehand, which would ensure that that would be something that would be comfortable. You know, all of this is like this formulaic belief, which is, and it's incredibly harmful formula, because it's just ignores the way that the body naturally works.
Tell me more. I am so with you. How does the body work and what should we be doing?
Well, we need to warm up, right? And that looks different for everybody.
Yes.
But we need to be able to be warmed up so that we don't cause injury, so that it starts to feel good as opposed to kind of mechanical. The word I use to describe it, if my body is not quite on board, especially internally, is it can feel kind of tinny.
Ooh,
And I'm like, that's kind of unpleasant. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like painful, but I don't like it. I don't love it, you know? And a lot of that's because there's a lack of, of that kind of, not even a total lack of arousal, but like we have to get it to a certain place. There's kind of the beginning stages of like, that sounds nice. And then but the body, it takes a while for the body to be like, oh, right. Okay, this is what we're doing. I'm on board, and it needs gentle cues for that to happen. Not always, but in general, like images in your mind are popping up. Somebody brushes your neck and it's like, ooh, and then you're on board, right? Like it's incredibly diverse, but you can't just go from 0 to penetration.
Yeah, it's like, how many times do we have to say that out to the universe before people start learning to, slow down, build the arousal, and it takes time for your genitals to fill up with blood and become engorged to enjoy penetration, if that's what you want, right? Or any sort of contact. It takes time for your body to warm up.
Yeah. I mean, even in like a kinky situation, in order to reach that kind of peak, whatever that is, whether that's, being beaten on the chest or getting flogged or whatever it is, you cannot just go in all wild from the beginning. You're going to hurt this person and probably very much upset them at minimum, if not traumatize them. And the body is it's not prepared to be walloped like that from the beginning, right? You start easy and then you slowly ramp up with feedback from the person that you're doing this to, right?
Absolutely. It almost reminds me of kind of like music, we don't come in heavy with the drums right at the beginning. And I guess as I was thinking about this metaphor, some music does. So let me say that, and there might be people that do like to be spanked right from the beginning, right? Hard. And that is what gets their body going. But I just want to say for the most people, like, it takes time. And like, we're creating a song and a dance together. And if the drums hit like towards the end, once we build up that tension in the rhythm of the song, hell yeah, go for it. Hit it. And it's going to hit so much better than trying to start out from the top. Like, just like going like that. And I think it's wild for me to think about how you can literally have the exact same sensation, physical touch, right? And it creates wildly different responses in the body depending on how aroused you are.
I think that's one of the most, it to this day shocks me. Because I'm just like, whoa, we tried this. I'll give an example. I have very sensitive nipples, and that means a lot of times it's like the gentlest touch is plenty in the beginning, especially. But then depending on what I've gotten to, where I've gotten to, it's like, oh, somebody pinched in the beginning and I was like,
yeah. And
somebody pinched now and I'm like, heck yeah.
Exactly.
And I'm still like, that's bonkers.
Exactly. Which is, I think, why when a lot of people are experiencing sex that doesn't feel good and they feel so confused because, they're doing all the things, it's like, well, maybe the arousal just hasn't been there yet. The physical acts you're doing are correct, right? But like the arousal hasn't been built there for it to feel like that yet.
And that's that kind of like jamming that more thing that I'm like so reticent to do comes in again, because it's like, the kind of common lore around sexuality from magazines and things like that is like, just add more, engage in a threesome, be poly. Here's how to, give a wild blowjob.
Yeah.
Okay, sure. I guess, and again, I have engaged in all of those things, and I'm certainly not, but we don't stack polyamory onto something that is already scary and uncomfortable, right? We don't stack threesomes onto that. We don't, like, we have to kind of come back to the foundation again.
Mm-hmm.
And those things can be wonderful things when the conditions are right. And if the conditions are, sex is just generally anxiety inducing to me, let's not throw a third person in there. We're not there yet,
Yes, absolutely. If your nervous system's already, overstimulated, adding further stimulation is not going to help.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's taking that time to slow down, taking that time to explore your body. And I think, I don't even know what the statistics are. Like, there is no research on this, but like how many people actually have taken the time to slow down and explore their erogenous zones without the connotation of like, we're going to get to penetration if that's what you do in your sex, right? And have the orgasm. How many people have slowed down to just explore, be curious about their bodies? I think I'm sad to say it's probably low.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very low.
Yeah. Is there any advice you would give to someone who is maybe hearing this and wants to do this, maybe can't, isn't in your area, doesn't know who to connect with? Is there anything they could do at home that could maybe start to practice this exploration?
Yeah. So I do some homework assignments for my clients.
Yeah.
And they obviously are very useful for other folks. But really what I recommend are starting with breathing exercises, practicing mindfulness, and then working your way to sensate focus. So giving yourself your own hand caress, touching your hands, noticing where you like to touch, how you like to be touched in those places, things maybe you don't like, right? And then, but, making sure that it stays focused. So like, it's always tough because when there's somebody there and I notice that maybe somebody's like thinking about something else and I can kind of feel it, I can guide them. So you'd have to monitor yourself and bring yourself back and be like, okay, I started thinking about my day and what I need to do after this. And like, I also suggest people who have pets. Pets are, because you can co-regulate with pets too, which is really great. And we know, like, research shows that if you have pets, that petting them actually helps lower your blood pressure. So you can do sensate focus. And of course, a lot of animals, there are aloof animals out there, but like a lot of dogs especially are just like, oh, you're petting me? Well, I'm never leaving. But closing your eyes and like petting the animal and noticing, like, what does it feel like to sink my fingers into their fur? What does it feel like to touch their tiny little ears, right? So those are some places to start.
Yes.
And then, then you can start to move to maybe more erotic areas. Again, going very slowly, feeling all of the different spots, right? Yeah. Teaching that, and people are like, this feels nice on my arm. Like, that's good. And then they go to the genitals and it's like, I always have to be like, or just use a finger. What does it feel like to just touch your frenulum, right? What does it feel like to just touch between your inner and outer labia? Not smashing, but just like,
Absolutely. Yes, to slow down. I mean, and what you're talking about is, I think, important, where you're talking about earlier about slowing down to even do this through petting a dog, right? I mean, this is talking about your ability to be embodied and to check in with sensation on multiple levels, right? Because we, at least personally in my own struggle, I am always up in my head thinking about things about work and stuff, and I'm not tuning in to like, yeah, how does my hair feel on the back of my neck? But if I stop to focus on that, I can actually start to feel it, right? I'm like, oh, that feels kind of nice as it jostles back and forth. But I think we forget that our brains cannot multitask. Let's be very clear, cannot do that. we do run some background stimulus to keep us alive and always kind of monitoring, right? Even when we're asleep, we're running our heads, but our attention cannot be multitasked. So in that moment, if I start to think too much in my head, I can't necessarily feel my hair. And so it's that process of being able to slow down your thoughts enough to tune into the embodiment to feel. And that's a practice you can do all the time. Walk outside, touch a tree. What does it feel like to touch the tree? Like, this is the practice we're talking about exactly. Pets, slow down to start noticing. One of my mentors had invited me just to bring my fingertip and run it along my hand and just check in to that sensation. And like, could it be erotic if I'm slowly caressing and like, gently touching your hand? And I think the answer is yes. But do we slow down enough to check in with that?
I love that, by the way. that just gently touching your finger with your fingertip.
Yeah. And it stuck with me.
Yeah. Have you heard of the concept of forest bathing?
Ooh, no, but I mean, I've got my notes right here. I am writing that down. Tell me about it.
Yeah, forest bathing. I just learned about it about a year ago. And you go out into the forest, and you're not on your phone, and you just touch things. You feel the sun on you. There's a lot of moss where I live in the Pacific Northwest, so you can just find beds of moss to lay in. So and I love moss. I love the sensation of moss. So I'll just lay in the moss. Yeah, it's being out in nature. It does slow your heart rate down, but it's another way to connect can feel very erotic, right? And there's the whole concept of ecosexuality, which at first I was like, okay, what is this?
What are the hippies
and then I was
doing?
I went out and I didn't realize when I was doing this forest bathing, but I was like, I did it, and then I learned about it later. And I was like, the first time I went and did that, I was like, oh yeah, this is an erotic experience for me. Like, there's something about this that feels, I was just, it was so, everything was stripped away. I had nothing to distract me. I couldn't go pick up my phone or my computer or I could think about my to-do list, but I was deep in the woods and I couldn't do any of it.
Exactly.
So it made it easier to be like, well, what else am I going to do? I'm going to go lean up against this tree, lay in the grass, brush some of the pine needles against my cheek.
Absolutely. And connect with your body. I mean, nature is literally a sensory playground. You know what I mean? I teach yoga outside during the summer, and just even yesterday teaching to feel the sun on your body and then the soft, gentle caresses of the wind, and that unpredictable nature and the way that it can touch your skin is so soft and sensual if you slow down to focus on it. Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, I am going to look up forest bathing because it's probably right up my alley.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm having this desire to ask too, potentially, if you're willing to shift a little bit, about what your personal relationship dynamics are like. I'm curious. You kind of mentioned poly. I studied a lot about non-monogamy. I'm curious if you could tell me, and I would be willing to share a little bit about what your relationships are like.
Yeah. So I've been polyamorous since a little after I moved to Portland. And it took me a while to get to, I realized how much in my 20s, I struggled with. There were so many things. I'm also an anarchist, and I didn't want to admit to it for a long time because I was, yeah.
I saw the tattoo, yeah.
Yeah, if you're looking, yeah. The indications are all over my body. But I was like, this sounds really cool, but it can't be for me. And I realized, a couple of years afterwards, that it was about not wanting to tell my family and have them be like, oh, God, of course she's doing this now. You know what I mean? So, but at some point, my family's from Colorado. They live in Colorado. I was here and I could kind of do things without having to tell them. And eventually I did, but so I started exploring polyamory, and I met my nesting partner. Well, I actually met him about the time that I came out as poly, but we didn't start dating for about a year. And when we did start dating, I said, so I was single poly up until that point. And I said, like, this is something that I feel really committed to. And he was like, he knew about this. He had been involved with Occupy Wall Street, and the medics, a lot of them were poly. And so he was like, yeah, that sounds okay. It is something that I have had folks approach me many times, because I've been doing it now for almost, for a decade.
Yeah.
Folks will kind of be like, I'm having some trouble in my relationship. I'm considering this. And I'm like, don't. Like, you need to deal with those problems first.
Yeah.
Don't. You're not ready. And I'm like, and I sing Polly's praises. I do love it, but it is never a solution to relationship problems. And we had, not that we had relationship problems, but he's a cis man who grew up in Wyoming. And while he was pretty far along by the time I met him, he definitely, like, we had to have some tough conversations, in the beginning. We had to learn, and both of us had to learn to communicate, but like his ability to understand how do I want to say this? Relationships for men, romantic relationships, I think for a lot of cis men, are the replacement for intimacy, the intimacy that they lack in other relationships. And I was like, this is too much pressure. I don't want to be your everything. This is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like you have to make male friends. You have to I don't care, make any type of friend you want. I don't give a crap. I just need you to not seek intimacy slowly with me and use me as your emotional support. It's not fair to me. You know what I mean? And so there was that. I think also new poly is really easy to be taken advantage of because you're so excited and enthusiastic. And so we both kind of had missteps with picking other relationships.
Sure.
And that took a good couple of years. And now I think we finally have more or less hit our groove. But currently I am only seeing him.
Mm-hmm. I'm
about to turn 40.
Yeah.
I think I'm starting to just slow down. And I am queer, but so basically men are always difficult for me. I got really lucky with him.
Yeah. Yes.
And everybody else, I'm too shy to approach. So I just end up like, and he's much more of an extrovert.
Sure.
So he's out there kind of thriving, and I'm comfortable with it. It gives me a lot of time to myself. I do also have sexual needs met because I do sex work, and I do have some kind of ongoing relationship with my clients.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty interesting because I think people kind of, they see a huge delta between him and I, as far as like, he has these like deep, much more like, partnered relationships. And folks have brought up, monogamous folks have brought up like, hey, this seems kind of like not very fair, like to her. And so he one time was like, I just want to check in. And I was like, honestly, everybody comes to poly for different reasons, for, more emotional intimacy, for just general abundance in their relationships. And for me, it kind of is always sexual. So if that need is being met in my work and I don't want to put in the effort, like, I'm fine.
Yeah.
And so it's been really not challenging, but interesting to kind of notice how people perceive poly that isn't this like, we all live together and we each have two partners outside of each other a piece, like,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sometimes there's like this sort of idea, exactly of what you're saying, right, of like kitchen table polyamory, where everyone dates everyone knows everyone, and we're all sharing Thanksgiving dinner together, right, rather than the ability to construct relationships that fit your needs, fit your partner's needs, the other people's needs, in the unique ways that we are all unique.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of our dynamic right now.
I'm sure you've heard of the term relationship anarchy.
I have. I don't think I've achieved it, though. Because the idea is really about also prioritizing your friendships as much, equally. And I think, not that I don't, I mean, not to get back into capitalism, but I find that with my friends, we're always scheduling each other in, and it doesn't have that same, you know what I mean? It does always kind of fall by the wayside. And so I don't believe that I necessarily practice relationship energy. I think it's kind of the ultimate goal for
Yeah.
me, at
Yeah,
least.
yeah, yeah.
I don't think I've achieved it.
Sure, sure. Yeah. I I mean, I try to practice it, but I guess in that same way I would say I haven't achieved it either, right? I mean, and here's where I want to push back a little bit on the ideas of relationship anarchy, right? Because, like, the idea is not having a hierarchy between our platonic, romantic, and sexual partnerships, right? But also, I think that hierarchy might not be necessarily in time and energy, but maybe in the intimacy that you can share with people, dare I say, because I've kind of tried to think about this where, like, say I do start even just a business with someone and that's a meaningful relationship in my life. That relationship is going to take more time and energy than some of my friends might. And I can love that relationship, love my nesting partner, and love my friends. But then, like, I will never achieve relationship anarchy unless I do like 50, like all the way across the board, which I don't think is reasonable, especially if you share things like a mortgage, which means you sleep, on the same, like that just the timing, like the variables, it is impossible to have a 50-50. So, like, would we never reach relationship anarchy?
Yeah, I mean that's fair.
Yeah. Or
I see what you're saying.
yeah, or dare say we have kids, right? Like, if you choose to have kids with a nesting partner, that relationship might take up more time energy than I can have to devote to my friends. And so it's something at least I've thought about, right? Because, like, yeah, the value system is non-hierarchical, but, like, what does that mean? I think that a hierarchy is inevitable. And I think it's impossible to avoid a hierarchy depending on, yeah, if I start a business adventure, own a mortgage, maybe raise kids, whatever I do with these people, like, we can't avoid hierarchy.
Yeah, or at least concentrating your time in the places that makes sense to concentrate your time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah. I'm, I guess, not an expert yet. This is what I'm doing my dissertation on, relationship anarchy, so maybe I will say that very soon. But I think that it's important to think about, yeah, like, especially if you say that you think it's the most ideal relationship, but that you can't achieve it, like, I guess that, yeah, I just wonder what gets in the way if, like, that's what you aspire to be, a feeling like it's maybe not there for you. It's tricky. I mean, all relationships, navigating all of this and what it means, but at least for me, what I've been trying to do is to be open to the level of meaning that my platonic relationships can have, not necessarily the time or the energy, but, like, the importance in terms of intimacy and what those people mean to me.
Yeah, I definitely realize that I'm like, oh, well, maybe this is me getting once again in my inexperience, getting caught up in like the shoulds and what I
Mm,
think ideally is to happen. Yeah, without like acknowledging the day to day reality of being a human, and that like
exactly.
prioritization is necessary, especially in our relationships, and like sometimes you just got to spend more time with somebody. And, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's why it's important to have these conversations because we're, like, constantly changing it, creating the language because there's not a lot of language, I think, for this new way to orient to people and relationships in our lives. So part of, I think, the problem is we just don't even have language for these ideas. At least that's how I feel half the time. I'm like, what are the words to describe what I'm feeling right now for you? I don't even know? So it's like trying to sit with other thinkers, other, people in the space like you to just, like, sit and get our teeth into these ideas and talk about it.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious too. One of the things that I think I've had a hard time with is with friends that are more normy,
Yeah.
because I do have some of those. I'm careful with expressing love with them because I worry about how they will receive that. And I think that also seems to get in the way of like kind of achieving that relationship anarchy is like, how will this be received if they're
Yes.
not, tapped into this concept of relationship anarchy?
Yes, 100%. 100%. That's definitely something that at least I've navigated through, specifically as a cis woman with cis heterosexual men, right? So, specifically, also what you said earlier about men, cis men being kind of socially conditioned to not be emotionally available, meaning that a lot of that gets put onto your primary heterosexual partner. The second that I start to hang out with someone who's a cis het male, there's almost this sort of, oh, if we're getting close and she's expressing her love for me, it means that we're going to start a sexual and romantic relationship. And that is the only sort of intimacy that we can share. And one of my close friends that listens to the podcast, although I'm talking about him, that's kind of what happened when I first met him. He had never heard of relationship anarchy. And so like us just hanging out had this connotation of like, oh, is this sexual romantic? Is it? And it took like a lot of conversation to be like, I don't feel those desires, but I love you and I care for you so much and I want to keep building the intimacy that we have. But it's difficult to navigate because I think we have schemas of what this level of closeness means and what it means for our future and what our relationship's going to look like.
Yeah, totally.
So yes, I'm here to say yes, because it's completely novel territory.
I would agree with that. I think it's, yeah, and good on him for sticking around and like trying and having that conversation.
Yeah.
Like, rejection can be, it can feel like rejection, right? And two, we don't really teach people to cope with that and not disappear. So that's a lot of emotional maturity on his part.
Yeah, I'll be sure to like shoot him a text and be like, "You're awesome, love you," because that's a good point. It does take a lot, and like, yeah, to stick around that and like feel secure after a potential rejection like that can be really tough. And I think this is exactly like the work that is trying to rethink, re-understand our relationships with people and what's possible in the world once we take off these monogamous, heteronormative scripts and to rethink what sort of intimacy we can share with people. And I think that is how we find fulfilling relationships, a fulfilling life, is allowing the intimacy to build in whatever way that feels natural and not putting caps on it or drastic expectations on what that is, right? It's just letting it grow for what it is on its own.
Yeah. I took a compassion immersion class. And I want to bring it up because it was an amazing class. Yeah, it's Julia Frodal is her name.
Okay.
And she still offers them. But one of the things that she asked us to do, I can't remember if it was in the first compassion immersion or the second one, but she asked us to write letters to our friends expressing our love for them. And one of them was with a cis man who is married, and we're very close. And I couldn't send it. I was too afraid of what that might get, not so much that he would take it that way, but I was concerned about what that might look like. Cause they're pretty, they're monogamous and, while they're both anarchists, I don't even know if they know about relationship anarchy. And it was this very intimate letter of just like, this is why I admire you. And I think that you're an incredibly amazing person. And I just like, I kept being like, just give it to him. And I couldn't do it. And I was just like, oh my gosh. Cause I was so concerned about the implications of like what that might feel like to him. And I was like, this is not like me professing my love in a romantic way.
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. It was a level of vulnerability that I had not experienced in a lot. I know a vulnerability that I clearly was incredibly not comfortable with, because like obviously I trade in vulnerability, right? Like that's the work that I do. Sure. But this is one where I was like, oh, I'm really uncomfortable with this. Like I'm not ready.
Yeah. Hey, and that time might come. You can still send the letter. There's still, right? Like, still have that chance if it ever feels right. But I think it makes a ton of sense to, be concerned about how that might be received on their end, given what we know about the expectations of intimacy. I think it makes me sad. Like, this makes me sad that you love someone so dearly, but because of society, because of the way that we've structured relationships, at least within our Western context, we can't even express that love and feel that fully. Like, even that not being able to send the letter, I feel like is like a squelching internally of our own experience. Like, I want all of us to be able to feel like, yes, I can express my full love and care for all people.
Yeah. But therein lies the work. For me, at least.
And all of us, let me be clear. I mean, this is like, I am so with you in this work of trying to figure out, because I mean, the levels of social conditioning it's the water we swim in as fish, and like we sometimes don't even know that we are taking it in. And so at least for me, it's been something like, even I had a really tough breakup a while back where once I broke up, I was like, oh, I'm single. But like, I don't even think that aligns with relationship anarchy concepts, right? Because I'm never truly single. I have multiple other relationships. And even that frame shift alone helped me to feel tremendously better from this, oh my God, I'm so alone and I'm so alone in the world. Oh no, to like, oh my God, I have such beautiful people in my life that I love. And it gives me a whole different feeling of what my experience is on this world. So I think it's powerful, this work that we're doing.
Yeah, I love that. And hopefully it made that transition out of that relationship easier.
It did.
Because I know, yeah, it's so easy to feel like steeped in that loneliness. And
yeah. I want to hold a little bit of space as we come to the end of our time. Is there anything that's lingering that maybe we didn't talk about that you wanted to bring up before I transition to a closing question?
I don't think so.
Okay. Yeah. This has been fun thus far. So. I'm enjoying it. So then the closing question is, what is one thing that you wish other people knew was more normal?
Something that I wish people knew was normal was the degree to which we require touch from just about anybody and all different kinds of touch.
Yes. I just started doing more like hands-on touch in my yoga classes for this exact reason of like, how can I support the world in receiving more platonic, healthy, safe touch? I think we forget how much we need that, especially, again, here's the relationship anarchy, right? Like pinning all of that down to our sexual and romantic partnerships and not feeling free to express that sort of love, hugging, gentle caressing, the sorts of love that we all need from our other relationships too.
Yeah. Hand-holding. I think platonic hand-holding needs to make a big comeback. I do substitute teaching, and for whatever reason, I really seem to like middle school kids. And I see it a fair amount there, and I have for a while, and I'm just like, all right, kids are all right. They're going to be okay. They are definitely, like they're modeling for me, even for all of us. Like, I see platonic hand-holding on the regular. Hopefully, I don't know if it'll make a comeback with the adults, but hopefully the youngins will teach us.
Absolutely. And at least you and I can be a part of like setting the example and making that happen. Yeah, this has been fun to me. Anytime that we can talk about mindfulness, sexuality, slowing down, relationships, rethinking what those mean. Like this is like my cream of the crop, perfect, lovely conversation.
Yay!
If you enjoyed today's episode, then leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcast. And if you're a part of the anarchist community, then follow us on Instagram or nominate a guest for the show by sending in a letter to modernanarchypodcast@gmail.com. Otherwise, I'll see you next week.